Hello, welcome to our webinar in coordination with Draup, entitled Managing Talent for Growth and Advancement. A notable challenge facing HR leaders today is developing workers in ways that advance skills and engagement, as well as diversity and inclusion. What is the best combination of technology and human judgment to take bias out of the process of making promotions, awarding key assignments, providing advanced training, and other career development steps? How can these approaches help build the workforce of the future? For those of you who may not be familiar, Draup is an AI-driven reskilling and talent intelligence platform that provides in-depth insights on the talent ecosystem. As enterprises are transforming at a rapid pace, we are empowering HR teams with a comprehensive integrated view of the global talent ecosystem, including evolving roles and skills to assist in their talent initiatives. Now, just for a few quick logistical items, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event. So look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from the Society of Human Resource Management. And look out for a written account of the conversation soon on our website, fromday1.co. At around 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time, starting now, using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, the business journalist Lydia Dishman, who reports and edits for Fast Company on tech and leadership, and has written for CBS Money Watch, Fortune, and the New York Times, among others. And our speakers, Vijay Swaminathan, co-founder and CEO of Draup, and Kristi Robinson, head of talent acquisition at Citizens Bank. Okay, Lydia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you, audience, for being with us today. I can't see you, but I know you're there, and I know that you're in for an excellent discussion with lots of insights from my panelists here, Vijay and Kristi. I'd like them both to introduce themselves, but first I wanted to just sort of set the stage. We have kind of a two-part discussion today. Part of it is about talent acquisition and hiring, and part of it is about professional development. So we will tackle both of those topics, each one at a time. But now I'd like to turn it over to Vijay and have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Steve. It's a great privilege and honor to be here. Thanks, audience, for your time. My name is Vijay Swaminathan, and I lead Draup. We work with enterprises on various reskilling and talent management initiatives. The last 2 to 3 years, we have had the privilege of working with several companies in assisting them in their digital transformation journey, identifying critical new skilling paths that are emerging and new roles that are emerging, and also look at it from a point of view of upskilling as well, because today it is not just about learning towards a new skill or a new role that is emerging, but also amplifying your current skill to really go towards the next level within your role as digital disruption has taken over. That becomes very, very critical. So I am delighted to be here and share our learning, definitely approaching this from a learning perspective, and all insights we provide are from the standpoint of a practitioner. So that I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Every day is a school day, so it's always good to approach things from a learning perspective. That's my favorite thing to say. Over to you, Kristi. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes, hi, hello. My name is Kristi Robinson, and it's such a pleasure to be here today with everyone. I have the pleasure of leading the talent acquisition function for Citizens Bank. And so I get to think about how do we attract talent, how do we identify the right talent, and how do we find the right talent at the right time. I've been in the HR space. It's hard to believe that it's over 20 some years now. It's like, when did that happen? And so I've really enjoyed the partnership that we have developed with Vijay and his organization over the last couple of years. And so I think we have some great things to share with everyone today. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as I said, I want to kind of break this down into two parts. And I'd like to start with hiring, because obviously you have to get people in the door before you start developing their careers. And this is a challenging time. Obviously, unemployment is still very high, and a lot of people are not hiring. There are numerous hiring freezes across many different organizations, but there is some movement. And I've heard over and over again throughout the pandemic, never let a good calamity go to waste, because there is opportunity to be found. So let's start by talking about hiring and what trends you're observing in hiring practices since COVID, other than the fact, obviously, that interviews have to be conducted remotely for the most part. Kristi, what are you seeing in terms of trends?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because that was the biggest shift, right, in terms of getting everyone to now do the virtual video. But we actually, interestingly enough, we did see a slight uptick in terms of interested applicants coming to our site. But what we found interesting that in places like technology, for example, we're not seeing a big shift there. So there's certain roles that are still in demand. And it's as if, and I don't want to say that they haven't been impacted. There's certainly, I can't think of, any industry that hasn't had some degree of impact. But what we've actually seen, while hiring has slowed down a bit, we still are hiring in critical areas. The critical talent that everyone's after, they're still after. We're seeing that, while there is an uptick in applicants and interest, that people overall have a positive attitude. Yeah, so I would say those have been some of the things we have noticed.
Vijay, do you have anything to add in terms of macro trends?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like Kristi said, the areas of tech and like software and IT skills, those are absolutely on demand. And the impact also seem to have to be varying by industry, right? So for example, in this pandemic, industries like tech companies, digital natives, and as well as retail, all these companies are doing really, really well. Now, for us to understand the dynamics of the current present hiring trends, though, we have to look a little backward to say that the industries that already did a lot of work on digital transformation are able to sustain their efforts with respect to hiring, right? So for example, post the financial crisis, the banks already worked on a number of digital transformation initiatives, right? So they are able to seamlessly continue. Similarly, a lot of the retail e-commerce disruption that happened enable the retail industries to take it through. Some of the hospitality segments, other than perhaps Airbnb type example, they were not able to truly accelerate on making their experience entirely digital. There you would see some drop in hiring. But the ILO has come up with interesting analysis, the International Labor Organization. They have said that the pandemic has impacted the millennial hiring a little bit more than the experienced hires, right? So, and that is not necessarily because of pandemic, but even before our labor market analysis showed that the youth population, the millennial talent has been getting fewer job opportunities. And there are many reasons for that, which we will get into as we discuss more. But that is one area that is personally concerning me. How do we really make sure that the millennial opportunities are created across enterprises? So that's one interesting challenge that is emerging.
Well, I don't want you to go quite yet, because you're talking about digital transformation, and I'm just wondering what in terms of talent acquisition has transformed via digital. We've certainly heard about automation with applicant tracking systems and how AI can remove human bias, which is still a controversial point. But what actually is being used to shift to digital practices?
I would love to take
Yeah,
one.
I think that you are Better
Yeah.
qualified to answer that.
So it's interesting when you were talking also the question about what trends are we seeing. What I actually found in our organization is that COVID has actually been an accelerator for a lot of the things we already had in place. So some of the things that we were trying to get up and running, example, maybe in our retail network, that we were maybe in a queue to get going live, whether it was video interviewing, now all of a sudden we got pushed up to the front. And so a lot of the technology things that we had in place on our roadmap, this has actually been an accelerator for that. One of the things we put in place, goodness, it's been maybe 18 months ago, we really wanted to dip our toe into that space to say, can technology make us more efficient and effective? And so we have a partnership with Paradox to where we actually are using a virtual recruiting assistant. If you go to our career website, you'll see her. She's wearing a green sweater. Her name is Jamie. And so Jamie went live for us last November. And we've actually are finding that we've been able to leverage Jamie. We treat her as a team member, but Jamie handles, you can have a text conversation with her, you can have a chat conversation with her on the website. She actually answered several thousand questions around COVID over the last several months, so we can actually help her learn and program her with information depending on what's top of candidates' minds. As you can imagine, there were a lot of questions around COVID over the last several months. What are we doing, et cetera? And so Jamie's been able to help us answer those questions. She actually thinks she's answered like 60-some thousand questions since we put her in place. And so if you think about, that saving time that recruiters or recruiting coordinators would have been answering. She also does scheduling for the recruiters. And so if you're going to have an interview with us, Jamie's actually going to schedule it, and she's going to send a text to you as a candidate that reminds you that your interview is coming up. She's going to ask you to let her know she needs to be rescheduled. So from that perspective, I say we've seen a big shift in how we're able to operate from an efficiency perspective. We are leveraging some selection tools. I think, everyone's kind of waiting to see, how is AI truly going to transform? Because I think there is a big question mark around, how do you really pull out the biases in that? And so while we've been comfortable using validated selection instruments, I don't know that we're ready to jump head in with the full-on AI, but we're certainly trying it out, like I said, with the virtual recruiting assistant.
So in other words, Jamie is a chatbot, is that?
Correct, correct.
And the AI is what I've heard in terms of adoption, it is being used in partnership with humans, not solely on its own. Many organizations are in that spot. They're just sort of in the trial and error, like how much can we rely on this? Vijay, is that, you're nodding your head, is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I think, if you look at the narration that Kristi gave, she mentioned that the Jamie is an extended member of the team. So we are all becoming a little bionic enterprises, right? So we have humans and we have machines, but we don't treat machines as machines. We kind of treat it as a digital avatar, right? I think it's one minor contextual correction there. It's not just a chatbot that we, that we have known for, right? This chatbot has a personality, it has characteristics, and you can train the chatbot so that it doesn't make it can contextually learn. So there is a lot more to than it's truly an extended team member. So I think I agree with Kristi on the selection process. We are not there yet. There is a lot of case studies where the very large companies have attempted that and then they pulled back. The public case studies like that. I think companies are a bit careful when it comes to leveraging AI on the selection side. But I think it would do, what happens is it frees up recruiter, it gives back time, and they can actually do some of those aspects. So I think very, very exciting times that way.
Well, when you talk about freeing up recruiters' times, it makes me think about time freed up to find non-traditional candidates from non-traditional sources. So my overall question is, what's the responsibility of an organization to find talent from non-traditional sources? And then, Kristi, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what Citizens Bank is doing to find more diverse candidates.
Yep, no, absolutely would be happy to. I'm a big believer that, when you think about talent, you want to think about it more broadly, right? And so what we, and clearly we do that against the backdrop of, what are the really critical roles to driving the agenda forward for the organization. And as we think about that, and then we turn and we look into the market, and I do believe there are two talent markets. I think we have an internal talent market with our existing colleagues that often can, I think organizations, it's very easy to forget that. So I always like to say we've got two talent markets. We've got the external, we've got our internal. And so as we look, and we can talk a little bit later about what we're doing with the internal talent market, but what we're doing externally is we want to make sure that we're starting early as, like we do partnerships. It's called, we're located in Rhode Island, Skills for Rhode Island, to where we're bringing in high school interns and giving them experiences in the summer. We partner with Europe, which is a phenomenal organization that we have had so much success with over the years. And so as we start looking from early career across the broader spectrum, is where are the places that we need to plug into and create partnerships on a local level? Maybe it could be national, even with something like a Year Up. But where are we curating those partnerships that's going to give us access to that talent, whether it's the existing talent that, today, or it's going to be the future talent coming up. We've also found success in actually partnering, whether it's with universities, and it can be a community college, it can be a larger university, on hosting events. So maybe we want to co-sponsor a hackathon with them. Oftentimes we will offer to come into different organizations and talk about how to prepare for an interview. And while we're doing that, we're actually there building relationships, whether it's with that university or it's another organization, and that actually allows us to have access to the talent. So I would say really take a look about what partnerships do you have from an early career. And again, a lot of these partnerships are free. And so are you taking advantage and leveraging those community partnerships that you have that would give you the access to talent? I would also say that, oh my goodness, I had a thought and it just left me. I'm sure it was a very important one. So again, with your universities, what kind of events can you sponsor there? And then around non-obvious, one of the big learnings we've had is helping our hiring managers think about non-obvious candidates and non-obvious talent. And so I think people often think, well, this is the role that I've always hired for, recruited for, and this, I know what I need, and this is exactly what it needs to be, right? They either need to have done this job or had this experience. And so we really are trying to shift managers to think more around what are the skills and capabilities that you need to acquire. And so oftentimes people maybe have a different role, but they still have those skills and capabilities. It's just not as obvious, right in front of your face. And so really getting managers to shift through that has been something. The other thing I would say that's key with diverse talent, bringing it into an organization, is making sure you have a diverse slate commitment. And that's something that we've embraced, quite actually recently and have already seen momentum. And that is just saying that we're going to commit, that we're going to have at least 2 or more diverse candidates on a slate, because if you talk to 4 or 5 candidates and there's going to be at least some diversity on there, the likelihood, the study was done, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. The results say that the likelihood that a diverse candidate would be selected if there are more on the slate. So that would be something I would recommend. And then also there's some different organizations out there that provide help with the language you use and how you post jobs. I think Textio is one. There's some, I think they may even have, there's a free version. There's different organizations that you can run your job description through and test to see what kind of, is it more, maybe perhaps the language is more male slanted versus female. And we tried that within our commercial area, and we actually found that some of our job descriptions, again, no intention there, it was a bit unconscious, the language was very male oriented. And so we noticed that just with that slight change, we actually got way more female applicants than we had for a particular role in commercial, and ended up actually hiring a woman as a result of that. So I'll stop with that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know about Textio thanks to my reporting, because I've done a lot in the beat of artificial intelligence as it applies to hiring. But the other thing that, you know, we keep hearing from a lot of startups like this is, you know, the bias removal. And I'm just wondering about that in terms of, you know, just you think about diversity that you can see. And a lot of times what I think employers are missing are just looking at the skills and how you can extract just the skill part of somebody's experience and use that to find a good candidate. And Vijay, you are nodding your head vigorously, so I'm going to come to you with this one and ask you, like, is it really that much potential for these digital tools to extract just that information and put all candidates on an equal footing?
Great question. Not sure if I can do entirely justice to that question, because it's a very big question that companies are attempting to solve. But I would say this, late last year, a very large tech company tried to hire in some inside sales representatives, right? So this is a key component in digital sales transformation. It's a very, very important job where you would have to play a very key role in enabling your frontline sales team, right? When they noticed that the 2 or 3 candidates whom they hired actually were part of the organization a year and a half back, and they were call center operators, right? They were completely surprised. What just what just happened in that period was these people had learned some of the sales and marketing skills, the digital marketing skills and other skills, understood how to use databases, and over a 6-month to 9-month period, some self-taught, some taught through the peers. People really learn on an ongoing basis, A, through their own peers, through their colleagues, and then B, through the ecosystem in which they belong, right? So unfortunately, when it comes to hiring, we are trained to look at what are the demonstrated skills that I can take it and put it to work immediately. But companies are realizing that the biggest business advantage that a company can have is to understand that skills are not point in time, discrete entities. It's a continuously evolving thing, and there is certain skills are readily, you can learn certain skills easily. It may take a little bit time, but all skills are fundamentally learnable, right? You can learn skills given the correct environment. So in that context, it is a huge advantage for companies to understand how these patterns are evolving. So right now, we are tracking well over 1,000 transitions that have proved very, very effective for companies, be it a call center agent becoming an inside sales agent, or I was talking to a CHRO of a hospitality company where we can say, how do we make the front office staff into digital marketing? Because they know customer service already. All we have to do them is teach them like 2-3 tools, right? So those type of transitions, and be it a transition for a business analyst learning 1 or 2 AI-based analytics tools like Able, for example. So you're immediately making them a machine learning developer, and not necessarily viewing this as a next opportunity just to upskill within their environment. I think knowing these case studies is extremely crucial, which is one area that we are focusing on, giving the research around what type of trends are happening. So really, really upbeat about this. I think that's the only way to solve the skills gap. And you may be tracking all this, but just in machine learning AI alone, we are expected to have a shortage of 1 million professionals by 2024, right? So there is no way we can without reskilling and upskilling, we cannot fill that gap. I think the COVID has only accelerated some of that demand. So this part is going to be very interesting. Many part is still unknown. How do we go about doing it? What is the type of infrastructure we need? What is the type of office that we need? There are some best practices, but this is still an evolving space.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that ultimately, if we do make this complete transformation to a less biased and more technology-driven hiring process, that a lot of non-traditional candidates will rise in a way that other candidates, wouldn't have even had the chance before. But now I want to segue that into the reskilling, upskilling part of our discussion, and talk about what's changed in terms of professional development, especially since the pandemic. But before we do that, I'd like to invite Steve back on for our station identification.
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to remind anyone joining our webinar in midstream that we're from day one, exploring managing talent for growth and advancement. Our sponsor is Draup. And as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time, starting now, and we'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A session that starts in about 15 minutes. Now back to you, Lydia.
Thank you. So yes, let's talk about professional development and what's changed or not since we've all been, most of us going to remote work, and some just keep on keeping on. Kristi?
Yeah, one of the things that we wanted to do as we were getting into this, once we saw that COVID wasn't going away anytime soon, is what are the tools, because we have a lot of resources available, training resources to colleagues, but what we actually found that came forward is people wanted more. For example, our most attended development or training program offered was meditation. So we were offering a weekly, which again, right, and I'm talking, there were hundreds and hundreds of people signing up for these sessions. And so we were offering a 6-week meditation series program. It was 1 hour once a week, and we thought, perhaps this would be helpful to the organization. And we were actually shocked that that was what people were taking more advantage of than anything else. We certainly also offered, as I'm sure some of you in the audience had done the same, around tips for working from home. That was another thing that we had to brush up on that library, because that wasn't something we had a lot of information on the shelf for. And so really trying to give colleagues tools that would really help them navigate this challenging time. And so kind of how to balance the work-life balance at home. Also how to help kids with their online learning. And so we saw that that was a really big shift for us during that time. And so there was less of an uptake on our other offerings and more focused on that at the time.
Is Citizens Bank doing just more traditional type of professional development still, like mentoring or management training?
Yeah, so, and the way we think about, kind of prior to COVID, the way we would think about development is really, it's more of how do you create a series of experiences for colleagues. And I also think it's a very personalized thing, right? I think we all like to, if you think, most of us like to have everything on our phone when we want to access it, and we can decide what we want and kind of organize our own playlist, if you will. And so our learning group, they're really doing a great job of looking at how they can curate content that actually is something more that can be consumed in micro learnings, and that it's when the colleague may want it, whether it's on an app. We're often finding that that's quite popular. We certainly have traditional, 2-day virtual training programs, management development, but we're starting to see more experiences. We have a lot of community of practices that are popping up. That's more of a grassroots approach, which I think is great. People that have a particular passion around something. We're also seeing our technology group has done a great job actually putting an incubator in place. So that's something that also from the internal talent market and external to say, okay, if people want to evolve a new software skill, whatever the case may be, they can apply for this incubator. It's a very condensed period. It's led by experts in-house. So whoever's really good at that particular skill set, they get an opportunity to teach and share. And then they'll do that in the morning, and then in the afternoon, they get to apply what they're learning to real-time business cases, use cases. And so we're finding that that's actually being very well received. They also have put a Scrum Master Academy in place. So a lot of project managers are shifting now into more Scrum Masters. And this is where Vijay and his team have been really great at helping us understand, what's the skills that go from a project manager to a Scrum Master, and what proficiency, right? So there's different levels of proficiency. And then how long would that take, and what kind of curriculum would they need? And so the work we've been doing with him is helping us curate that. Our innovation group likes to hold Shark Tank-like challenges to where we allow colleagues to come together to present their ideas for potential innovation dollars on, next generation products that we could offer. We find, again, right, it's about curating experiences. If they want to learn more about what's their digital fit, we have something called a digital fitness app, so people can go in and actually see, and it's not exercise, actually. It's more of how digital savvy are you, and what does that mean? So we really feel like between curating experiences, there's also a big, we feel like our responsibility to is inform colleagues that change is here. In case you haven't heard about it, change is here. All of our jobs are changing. I don't know a role that's not going to be impacted. And so we've been very focused on kind of helping people to say, hey, do you understand and realize this? And helping them kind of pick up the responsibility to understand, what do they do well? What should I be thinking about learning more? What are the skills of the future? And really understanding what those critical capabilities are. And then we set up a place to where they can come and decide what they want to learn and when.
Vijay, you mentioned that reskilling and upskilling was taking place well before the pandemic. Some of it was happening organically, and employees taking the initiative themselves. But what are the challenges that you see that employers are facing when they're implementing a more formal training initiative like what Kristi's talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you would know, and most of the folks on the audience would know, every company is now becoming a software company in its own way, right? Whether it is a bank, retail, a mining company, construction company. So as a result, we need a library of skills to execute our action items, our strategy, and take it to the customers, right? So this is and those library of skills include, your back-end skills, your front-end skills, UI, UX, and app skills, and all the range of technology skills. But other transformation thing that is happening is every function, even outside of technology, is becoming agile, right? So you need agile coaches, you need scrum masters, and all a range of roles that are created to facilitate this technology movement. The challenge that we see is because of the pressure to take this to the market, companies try and do one of the two things. One is they would try to hire every single keyword that matches the requirement that has come from the business, type it in, oh, there is this, put all this, like I need a data scientist who can do data model, at the same time host it on an AWS server, and at the same time it should be customer centric and be able to tell the story. And then you put all that, the entire Boston, there are 5 people, right? Then you are going after that, those 5 people. So what they are unable to do, or we would like them to do, is really build a boilerplate model, right? Basically divide the function into entry levels, mid-level, competent level, mastery level, and so on. Have enough pipelining within that function so that some of the simpler tasks can be done by a business analyst who's aspiring to become a data scientist, and then over a 2 to 3 year period, they would gain competence or mastery over time. This is one thing that that we see many companies are not doing, right? And as a result, when you find only 5 people are there in a place like wherever, New York, Boston, your natural tendency is to outsource. You would say like, I can't do this. Let me bring in folks from outside. And guess what? They're also going to bring somebody who's going to learn on your dime, right? So this is sort of a very complex thing that is happening. The second thing is when you are reskilling an employee from inside, even though it's been happening for the last couple of years, our analysis shows that there's only about 20% of the organizations are doing something really tangible when we track the actual case studies, right? So there is still a long way to go. And the challenges that they are reporting is not being able to, if you are an L&D organization, not being able to involve the subject matter experts in a logical way. I see that we have an organizational psychologist, let's say, and we want to transfer them into a UX designer, because the common skill there is empathy to customers, right? As long as you have that, the rest of the skills you can pick up over time. So when you walk that through to an SME, there is that, will I be able to do it correctly? Will I be perceived that I do not understand the technology? All these psychological components are forming a barrier, which is why what we do is we take that entirely burden and map out, this is how an organizational psychologist can become an UI designer or a UX engineer, right? And not having those maps limit your ability to interact with your internal SME. So unless you interact and win their minds, it's very, very difficult. And we have seen that challenge even at Citizens, right? The other aspect is having very, very big vision for reskilling. Right? And as a result, this is a very big project. We will transform X number of, impact X number of lives within the organization. And the problem is you can't come to proof point very soon. So one of the things that we are recommending is let's do more micro experiments, right? Let's not say that we will, through this reskilling, we will impact 1,000 people. Let's start reskilling 5 of our business analysts into doing higher grade of mathematics, higher grade of machine learning, and see how that works for 3 months. Let's document that experience, call that as micro experiments, and let's bring back that narrative to the discussion room and see how do we scale it from here. This is working, this is not working. These are the refinements we need to take. So sometimes it's kind of the conundrum, like, sometimes we say like they want to be visionary, thinking big, but sometimes I feel like they're thinking way too big and execution is suffering, right? So this is what is happening down in across many enterprises. So I think the COVID has accelerated a lot of this need, and hopefully you said early on that we should not leave any crisis go to waste. I think hopefully reskilling will be very different down the lane. So.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I'm also thinking about I like what Kristi said about encouraging innovation, like entrepreneurship within the organization. But I'm also seeing a rise, if you will, in the way that people are assessing these skills. And certainly LinkedIn has a new feature where people can take tests against certain skills so that they could get certified or get the mark on their profile that they are competent. So how can you measure competence? Do you have formal measures in place for that, so that an employee knows that they've met a certain metric and can go on to the next level? Kristi?
Yeah, so our head of learning would have a lot to say about this, because it is a big topic of conversation right now, and it's the whole badging concept, right? Is what we're actually looking at that internally, because making sure that if you do receive a badge in this, right, what does that mean, and does it mean the same across? And so I would say that we're in the middle of that. There's certainly some external certifications that are are there. You know, I know we see a lot of people that have the Scrum Master certification or the Agile Coach certification. But, you know, sometimes we find that there can be a discrepancy. Like we can, if we can all go and take, you know, an assessment and get a score, but how do we close the gap on that? And so in complete transparency, that's something we're figuring out currently internally from a badging perspective. You know, are we going to do it? How is it going to impact? Because it does have the potential, I think, to move nicely with the whole mobility focus we have and the reskilling. But we're actually picking a small, Vijay was talking about everyone wants to do everything at one time. We're actually spending a lot of time of looking at this in our retail space. And so within our retail sales force, our teller sales force, to say, okay, we know if a particular group has this, then they, by hands down, they should be considered for a particular role. And so in complete transparency, that's where we are. And Vijay, I don't know if you would offer anything from what you have with other clients.
Yeah, no, I think assessment is a complex subject, as you correctly said. Every company is going through challenges. I think the assessment has its own benefits and has its own downsides as well, right? So when you are going through a process of getting badges and things like that, as you are doing that, you would have to emphasize an ongoing digital habit, right? Where learning is not done when you gain the badge or when you get certified. There is so many things changing. So personally, I'm less fan of the certifications, but more in terms of some of the Shark Tank type initiatives that you have put out is the best form of assessment, because you can see how people are thinking about your problem statement and coming up with a solution, right? I think the more that concept picks up, it's because today, let's say, I am reading about a particular algorithm, be it, a network optimization algorithm or anything that I'm reading. The gap actually is not on the evolution of the concepts. The concepts are there. We know everything theoretically, but how do we truly put that back and relate to our projects? That's why I'm a big fan of the Shark Room initiative, Shark Tank type initiative you have, because every month about 10 or 20 people would have to think about your problem and use these external concepts and say, this is how we think this concept can impact your problem statement. I think, and that could be an internal certification you do. It's nothing to do with, but those are more valuable, contextualized to the problem statement at hand. And a lot of it can take, if you're a data scientist, it can take like 10 years for you to do that, to take an academic concept and even bring it to like even 10% of its usage in a practical problem. That's a very, very long drawn experience requiring task. But I think a lot of things are changing. And also, one of the things that we are really looking for is, if the person has shown a lot of learning agility, this is also something that we learned from the boardroom of Citizens, where almost all stakeholders, when we prepared for that meeting, I don't know, Kristi, if you recall, but we were actually preparing an inventory of, okay, these are the technical skills, these are the functional skills, like that. But what many stakeholders said, at the end of the day, what we are looking for is being agile and learning, being able to learn, because there is no way you can get caught up on this. There is so many products, so many solutions. Python itself has thousands of libraries. So every day it's getting added, something is getting added. So you absolutely have to have that learning agility. So to me, in the certification, more than the certifications, these qualitative assessments that come from the teams and the managers, I think that is going to be a huge driver for whom we select as the emerging talent pool or the next generation leaders within an enterprise. So it's a lot of it is our performance systems have to change, but that's a different 1 hour topic by itself. So, but I'm super excited what companies are doing in the last 12 to 18 months.
I had another question before we go to the audience Q&A. How do you think that this affects engagement and encourages loyalty? Kristi? I mean, certainly we've heard plenty about the gamification aspect of some of these types of initiatives like hackathons or Shark Tanks, as you say, but what have you seen measurably?
You know, I think it creates enthusiasm around, like you can feel an energy around it when people get really excited and invested in what they're trying to do, because they know that what they're doing actually matters. It's going to impact. They can see that direct, and that's really what we're, especially with early career colleagues, we find that that's something that's very important to them, is that they want to be able to know that they can come in and their work's actually going to have an impact. We also find that that's really important in the technology space. I spend a lot of my time in focus groups across the enterprise, wanting to understand what makes our engineers tick, what attracts them to our organization. And so in having these conversations, we're able to actually put together personas, right? We want to understand what's on somebody's mind, not only is there when they're considering us as an employer, but once they get here, what's going to keep them here. And that kind of engagement actually has been, we hear that feedback over and over again, but that's also why people stay. They have the access to, they're always quite surprised and energized by having access to the senior level leadership. The fact that they get to do these kind of presentations to members of the C-suite is very exciting for them. And so I would say where we see that is in our retention numbers, right? It's hard to keep tech talent. Sometimes it took a while to kind of wrap people's minds around, if we keep them for 3 years, that's great. And so, sometimes that's hard for people to understand. But I think that's where we're seeing the outcome, is that they've joined and they're still here, and they're very much engaged in helping us bring other people here.
Vijay, would you agree that it's
yeah, absolutely. I think a study that was done by a team of researchers in University of Chicago comes to my mind. Like, they were assessing why in a company that, in spite of having all the learning infrastructure, digital learning infrastructure, the consumption of those by the team was less. So they were wondering, like, what is happening? We have cutting edge content. It is practically free for all employees. We are creating time, we are communicating, yet people were not consuming it or learning it. And one of the models they had suggested that they would intercept the process by having what is called an empathy coach, right? An empathy coach would not be a technical moderator. They had a separate person for that. But an empathy coach would be posing questions like, we have so much to do, yet we have to come here and learn. What do you think about that, right? It's more questions like, we understand that you have not done programming before, but now you are trying to learn Python. Things like that. They would document these narratives. That slowly drew people into the system, and they started, when they felt like there is no shame involved, so as to speak, to log their challenges, and it is moderated. They slowly saw that the involvement got better and better over a 6-month period. The moderator comments went down and the learner comments picked up, and they were also debating about topics. So engagement, the reason that story comes to my mind is empathy is a very big component of keeping our workforce engaged. We have to be realistic. The SMEs, leaders have to be constantly trained by HR to say that if you get a reskilled employee, they're going to take a little bit time to figure certain things out, and we have to give them that time. And we try so much of that in our tech team as well, right? We have had phenomenal success in that. But it is going to take time, and it is anything that we can do to be empathetic about that. That doesn't mean we won't challenge them, but be empathetic about them. We can, and the advantage of having a reskilled tech employee, you will definitely get more than 3 years. So if you have enabled someone like a business analyst to do some basic Python-like programming, and if you make it work, it will be a struggle, but if you make it work, that person, studies show that they stay at least 30%, 35% longer than hiring for very specific skills. So it also has, to Kristi's point, it has direct impact on retention as well. So
Okay, I want to shift over. We have some questions from the audience. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And here's one from Mayank. Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Have you found any success with managers choosing candidates that did not fit the JD much? If so, which areas with examples would be very helpful? Kristi?
Yep, no, that's a great question. Actually, this was such a great success story. We had her come back and interview. She's been with us for, I think, about 3 years now. So back into our commercial space, we typically, there's a profile, right, of, you know, what they typically would want for a role, especially in early career, and in terms of specifically maybe what kind of degree. And so one of the things that the group worked with them there is they said, you know what, how about we get someone that doesn't have a business degree? So can you imagine having someone that maybe had, actually, I too think Grace was fashion. It was an art degree, perhaps. And so that was like a real paradigm shift for the business, because that right there's an example of that female art degree, etc. And so I have to give the business credit because they brought her on board, and she's been so successful. She's a relationship manager now, and we actually brought her back when every year we have interns and the college students come together for one day and have different executives interview them. And so we actually had this woman interview our CEO in front of all the interns last year. So that's like a real life example right out of the gate that said, you know, this is what I know what we normally would do, but could we try this? We've also seen that in our financial advisor space. And taking, you know, they don't have to have exactly that particular, our relationship banking space and our business banking group. Again, you really have to work with the manager to get them willing to take that chance. But we've had real success with it.
I have two questions on the generational divide, if you will. Lynn is asking, does your training vary based on the growing multi-generational workforce? And another attendee asked, how do you measure generational shifts in culture so you can respond to changes in career ambitions? So let's tackle this boomer, millennial, Gen Z.
The very real thing. Yeah, this is the first time we've ever had this many generations in the workplace. So it's absolutely a very real thing. You know, we are a very data-driven organization, you know, from an HR analytics perspective. And so everything we do from a survey perspective, we slice it and take a look to see the feedback that we're getting generationally. We do an annual, we call it an organizational health index, to kind of understand how people are feeling about lots of different things across the enterprise, but primarily there's a big piece of that that's around development and training. And so we're actually able to hear by generational what people are thinking and feeling about it. And also, if you remember what I said, we try to curate different experiences. So whether you want an app on your phone, or maybe you want to listen to a podcast instead, or maybe you want to download a book to read, what we try to do is we try to make sure that there's enough across the spectrum, right? And when we do these focus groups, it's not just the millennials that we talk to. We actually make sure that there's a good representation there, so we're hearing from everyone. And the interesting thing, what we're seeing, is that we've actually had a lot of success with the mentorship going both ways. So we often will pair, you know, a millennial or someone that's just coming into the organization. I guess what is it now, Z? Which just sounds crazy that's here. We will actually pair these two together. Maybe you could have a boomer with a Z, and we actually see each of them learns just as much from the other. I personally actually always sign up to do mentorship, but it's really more of a co-mentorship with some of our early career, because I find they teach me probably more than I teach them. And so I think that's another way we're trying to make sure everyone's merging into the organization.
We have, I think, a really good question. When you consider non-obvious candidates, how do you decide how much extra training they need and whether the company is willing to make the investment? Vijay?
Yeah, I think it really depends on case-to-case basis. To a certain extent, we would have to look at a library of evolved career paths, right? One data set that can be very helpful, and I say that not because we excel at doing that, but basically, if you look at the evolution of a field like data science, like the person who's a data scientist today, go back 10, 15 years to see what they have done. It's basically a quantitative analyst type of career. They would have picked up some classical statistics. They would have done some good work in that field, then picked up machine learning, Python, and then get into data science. And if you're very good, you not only know how to model, but also can put it in a production environment and make sure it's available across the enterprise. Now, so all we have to do is, if you have talent at the beginning of this value chain, what is it going to take for you to accelerate that? That is number one, understanding the various links for this type of a profession. And number two, do you truly have, what is the true nature of what you want to do? Because you don't want to hire some super sophisticated data scientists and give them a bunch of spreadsheets and say, like, you work on this, you put all the data together. If that is what you are calling as data science, you are actually better off reskilling some of your internal talent and let them do that job. And then when you truly need it, the data science will come in, because the needs of complex skills are also overstated in enterprises, because sometimes we take pride in saying that we operate in that domain. We have X number of data scientists. To say that, we may create all these JD. So you want to avoid that. So if you are realistic about what you want to accomplish, and if you're able to see the skills progression of all these complex roles, then the third, you are really betting on the people whom you know, right? Because they are most likely in your organization. You know the learning agility, you know they are great people. So that is really your business case. And the other business case is, no matter what it is, our analysis shows that in complex roles, it is a 4 to 6 month of hiring cycle, right? And can you do that, but you also start this. So in the end, instead of getting two resources, instead of getting one resource, you're getting two resources, and you could tag them and build a team. And the other aspect, if I can make one point, you spoke about the generational divide, right? Sometimes it is about marrying the complementary aspects, right? One story that comes to my mind is for a financial services company, post-COVID, when the really senior workforce was used to meeting people face-to-face to get $1 million worth of investments from customers, now suddenly have to do it online and other things. And they were kind of very trying hard to teach them the web screening skills, taking recording, all that. We simply looked at the workflow and said, hey, don't even attempt to teach them all that. Just put a millennial along with them, let them do all this work, let them take the notes, let them organize. And they just come in just like the way they come on a phone call, and do what they are very good at. Because at the end of the day, what you care is that the business is conducted and the dollars transferred from customer to you. So in some ways, we somehow believe that now we have to teach everyone these digital skills, and that can also work sometimes, but you don't have to work that way, because when you have those skills readily available in the form of project managers, for example, in this case. So I think we have to look at it case by case. We have to be very creative, which is what we are trying to automate ourselves.
Well, in our final minute here, I'd like to do a little speed round for our audience. If you could give them one takeaway in terms of managing talent for growth, what would it be? No pressure, you only have a minute left, so 30 seconds each.
Shall I go, Vijay?
Yeah.
I would say make sure you are taking the time to have the conversations with people. That sounds so basic and so simple, but really just sit down and listen, and let's not make assumptions. And even though we have tons of data, which is really helpful, but don't underestimate the power of sitting down and having a conversation where you're fully present with someone and understanding what's important to them.
Amen. Vijay?
I think my biggest thing, which is a thing that I learned myself from people, leaders like Kristi. I think it's really important to be empathetic. I think empathy is the most important value that I am cherishing and celebrating, and it applies not only to your employees, but also to your extended ecosystem, like your vendors and partners, because these are complex problems, and being empathetic almost drives you to, I really want to go and do that next bigger thing. So to me, that's a big value. I'm reading up on that quite a bit. I may seek Kristi's advice as well on that.
Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have. If you had other questions or you just want to reach out and connect, feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Steve?
Thank you, Lydia, and our wonderful speakers, Kristi Robinson of Citizens Bank and Vijay Swaminathan of Draup. That was a great conversation. Thanks again to Draup and to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. Tuesday, August 27th, we will be talking about using tech to make the talent search more efficient and fair, kind of an extension of what we're talking about today. On Tuesday, September 1st, about how employees can embrace the meaning in their work. So thank you very much and stay well.